practicing mainly in area of direct taxation since 1989. He has secured rank in CA inter-examination. He practices in his individual name. He has been a lecturer in accountancy and taxation for a period of 17 years in Ghanshyamdas Saraf Girls College of Commerce and Economics and St. Andrews College of Commerce and Economics. He is a contributor to the feature Tribunal News published in the Journal of Bombay Chartered Accountants Society. He is a regular speaker at various seminars all over the country and has also presented papers and authored articles. He is regularly invited as a guest faculty at the training programs conducted by National Academy of Direct Taxes, Nagpur, and also by Direct Tax Regional Training Institute, Mumbai. Very recently, he was invited by Regional Training Center of NADT at New Delhi to deliver a lecture on Joint Commissioner Appeals. He has been invited by various commissionerates to deliver lecture to officials on varied topics. With this, I introduce before you Mr. Jagdish Panjabi. Thank you.
Thank you, Harish, for a kind introduction. Now I request Jagdish sir to take a charge of this.
On the fact that we've gathered here this morning to have a broad or a very broad, far from exhaustive glimpse of what is lying in store in the proposed bill, which is expected to be an act soon once the select committee gives a report. Possible that the bill may undergo drastic changes once the select committee goes through it, because there are far too many errors, if I may say so, because possibly the time available with the officers who have drafted the bill was too short. It's really a Herculean task to rewrite the income tax law, and that too a law as difficult as income tax in simple language. One may have thought, why do we need all this? I mean, one can always argue that there was jurisprudence explaining each of the terms. What was hurting you was the size of the law. So you could have always passed a bill saying that these sections, which have since become redundant, are now being omitted and deleted from the act, and you could have had a savings clause there saying that for past transactions these sections will still survive, just as you have done in section 536. Now when I say section of the bill, actually it is a clause of the bill, and by habit we use the word section, but for the bill we always use the word clause, and only when it becomes an act we use the term section. But when I say section with reference to bill, please understand it as a clause. I am referring to the clause of the finance bill, income tax bill 2025. Now what was hurting you was only the size. Law is bound to be difficult. Law is going to be difficult. It's not only law in this country. Go and check the law in UK. Go and check the law in USA. You will find that the Indian law is far, far simple as compared to those enactments. So I mean, I do not know what was the need. Because see, ultimately when we write something, we are envisaging that this should cover all possible situations. It's very difficult. It's very easy for me to stand here and criticize, ye ho gaya, this is wrong, that is wrong. But ask me to draft one chapter or one portion of the law, and I may not be able to do it. And which I believe will be true for most of us. Undoubtedly, the officers have done an excellent job considering the time and the limitation. The only reservation we have is that possibly the government had manpower. They should have gone through the drafts 2 or 3 times more before releasing it to the public. Now what has happened is the first draft itself has been laid in public domain, and therefore it has so many errors. Now if in couple of days study, that too of a part of the bill, what I consider relevant for this talk, I can find so many errors, so to say, or so many typos. I am sure the officers who are much more competent could have also found them out. The difficulty possibly was nobody bothered to read it 3rd time, 4th time, etc. before releasing it. So maybe, I mean, what we are discussing now may undergo a drastic change. Normally, this is my first lecture where I am speaking on the bill. Otherwise, I normally do not speak on the bill. I speak only when it becomes an act. I mean, I have never ever spoken on any of the provisions of the finance bill. After it gets enacted, maybe I pick up portions and speak on that. Okay, what are we going to do today? We are going to have a broad overview of the bill. What is being analyzed today is a far from exhaustive analysis. I have touched only a portion. You can compare it with something less than even a trailer of a movie which is to come. The analysis is on a broad presentation of the things covered in the bill as they stand today, knowing fully well that some of them are glaring typo errors and will undergo a change, and once they undergo a change, the meaning is going to become diametrically opposite. We are conscious of that. What I am absolutely not touching is the provisions relating to charitable trusts, certain non-resident taxation, AIFs, transfer pricing, tonnage tax, search and survey, TDS. I may touch one or two points, and repeal and savings, I'll just give you a glimpse. Now, see how thinking has changed. In 2017, we had the finance minister who gave some figures, and he says that we can conclude that we are largely a tax non-compliant society. Now, why are we a tax non-compliant society? Is it because the law is bad? Is it because the execution is bad or the administration is bad? I mean, am I reluctant? Is litigation happening because there is some gap in the legislation which you have today? Or is litigation happen because the officer exercises a wrong option? Is it that the execution is bad and therefore litigation is happening? Because ultimately, look at the statistics. In how many cases is the addition finally surviving? What is the percentage of cases where the addition is finally surviving? Today, I am told there are about 6 lakh of appeals pending with CIT appeals. And there is massive demands. Now, even assuming there is not a single appeal being filed after today, going by the standard or the target which CBDT has given to its officers, it is going to take a minimum of 5 years to clear the backlog. It is a wrong assumption to say that from today onwards there will be no appeal to be filed. But even assuming so, with the present strength and assuming that every officer gives 100% of his target, it is going to take a minimum of 5 years to clear the backlog. All in all, that I can say is that this bill gives a huge opportunity to us in litigation practice. Litigation practice is just going to flourish beyond this. Okay, now we saw what finance minister said in 2017, and we now have our present finance minister in budget speech of 2025 saying that I affirm the commitment of tax department to trust first, scrutinize later. It's very good to say this. Are we experiencing this? Are we trusted for anything? I mean, any statement that you make, are you trusted? Even if you give a loan confirmation in a cash credit case where you have taken a loan, does the officer stop at confirmation, or he says, gives me a balance sheet of the other person, give me income tax return of the other person, etc. I mean, I'm not saying that he's wrong, but I mean, then don't say trust first and scrutinize later. Say we will scrutinize where we consider it necessary. I mean, by and large, we will trust you. Okay. Now, these are all statements which were made by the FM. She says to develop the framework which has modern, flexible, people-friendly and trust-based regulatory framework appropriate for 21st century. So this is what she has in mind out of the income tax bill. After our presentation, we will see how far of this is achieved. She says the new income tax bill will be clear and direct in text with close to half of the present law in terms of both chapters and words. Now, the length of the law should not matter to my mind. The law should be clear. Law should be specific, which should not give rise to maximum litigation. Today, the law which you have was settled. Today, when I said notwithstanding, each one of you understood what it means. Now they are saying irrespective. Now, what is the difference between notwithstanding and irrespective? Wherever you had notwithstanding, throughout the law, they have replaced it with the word irrespective. Now, are they the same? If they are the same, what did you achieve by changing it? I mean, is it that when I say irrespective, you understand it more easily than when I say notwithstanding? A student of law or somebody who is reading law will understand notwithstanding very clearly. If I am stuck somewhere, undoubtedly I am going to argue in the court that irrespective is something different, notwithstanding is something different. Though I am conscious of the fact that dictionaries are saying that both mean more or less the same. I will say they are more or less the same, but they are not exactly the same, because when my client is caught, when there is a stake involved, I am going to explore every possible opportunity. The language used in the bill at various places is far from satisfactory. They use the pronoun which for a person who could even be an individual. Now try and frame any sentence in English. You never use which with reference to a living person. You may use which with reference to a living person where you are referring to plural, but certainly not when you are talking of one individual. Which is a Hindu, I will never say. I will say who is a Hindu here. I mean, so, but here when you go ahead in the law, in the proposed bill, they are using it. There is an old decision of 1930 something which says which cannot be used with reference to a living object. Which is always, which company is a shell company. I will not say who is a shell company, but when I come to an individual, I will use who instead of which. But they have continued. I mean, so now what will happen? Someday when I'm stuck with a 40A1 disallowance, I'm going to argue, look here, you have used the word which. This person is an individual, therefore he is not covered because which does not go with living persons. Of course, I'm also conscious that in the context of trademarks, Supreme Court has said that which can also refer to a living person, but that was a case where multiple people were being referred. That is why I said, okay, when I want to refer to more than one living people, I may sometimes use the word which, but when I refer to a single person, I will not. Okay. Now there is a taxpayer's charter today also, which says, and we don't use this much, we should be using it. The department shall treat every taxpayer as honest unless there is a reason to believe otherwise. Now this is there. Even today it's there. All that has happened is in the bill. You now have a separate provision for this. Okay. Now look at this observation of Dr. Ambedkar made in a speech before Constituent Assembly. However good a constitution may be, it is sure to turn out bad because those who are called to work on it happen to be a bad lot. See the foresight the man had. He said, whatever I may do in constitution, howsoever good constitution I may draft, if the people executing it are not good, the constitution will not work. Equally, he added, however bad a constitution may be, it may turn out to be good if those who are called to work it happen to be a good lot. You could have lived with the present act. See, I mean, there's nothing wrong. At best, what you're saying is we are putting everybody on an equal footing. Somebody who's just starting a career and is a 50-year law student, the new member here, he and I are put at a pedestal. He has to begin reading, I also have to begin reading. The difference is I carry the baggage of the past, which he does not carry. Therefore, I have to unlearn. Whatever I have in mind, I have to erase that or see how far that is relevant over here. Otherwise, I will make mistakes of confusing the things. I will mix up the old law with the new law. I may at times succeed, most of the times I may not. I mean, it all depends. Okay. Now, what is the objective of the bill? What was the objective ultimately? What do you want? What do you want in the bill which the Act did not give you? You want a reduced size. You have achieved it. From 800 odd sections, you come down to 536 sections. Undoubtedly. But how did you achieve this? You have deleted redundant provisions, which even otherwise you could have done. With the old law also, chapter 20A which was there, chapter 20C which was there, 230A provisions which were there, several provisions which were redundant, you could have just removed them from that book and you could have had a slimmer law, if that was it. Then you say you want something to be easy. Now, as I said, law can never be easy. Now you are saying I have removed alphanumeric sections. How long is this going to last? How long is this alphanumeric not being there going to last? Today, if you want to make an amendment, we see that a host of amendments are required. Maybe most of them they will carry out. I'm certainly saying that once the select committee goes through it, the officers read it twice, thrice, they will change it, whatever is obvious. But still, everybody is a human. If you want to correctly understand the law, it is going to take 10 years, 15 years. Because only when somebody is caught, he reads the section again and again and again. And then he tries to find mistakes in that. That's how the law develops. On day one, you cannot write a commentary on the income tax law. I mean, only when issues happen, when real life situations happen, and you read that very same section again and again, you unravel different meanings of that provision. Now, today, if you want to amend the law, what are you going to do? Are you not going to insert a section in between? Or are you going to say, I will insert everything behind? If you insert everything behind after 536, then is it going to be easy law? It's going to become more difficult than what it earlier was. Now, we are told again and again in the press release, in the FAQs, that there is no major policy change. Let the government give a statement officially that there is no policy change. Then we have no issue, we do not need any such lectures. Why? Because let the government give that notwithstanding is same as irrespective. So wherever you read irrespective, understand it as notwithstanding. I've got no. Wherever there was as may be prescribed, they have now said as prescribed. Why? दो word कम करने का था. 910 times perhaps that as may be prescribed was there. So I have reduced 1800 words. But what did you achieve? Is as may be prescribed and as prescribed the same? Earlier you read as may be prescribed. Today you are reading as prescribed. Are both one and the same? I'm asking you. To my mind, undoubtedly no. As may be prescribed means आज मैं prescribe नहीं कर रहा हूँ, future में करेगा, CBDT करेगी. अगर नहीं किया तो भी ठीक है, उसको ठीक लगा तो करेगा. I trust CBDT. But when you say as prescribed means what? Already done. Now, if you have already done, are you going to have rules simultaneous with the act? If you do not, is the legislature correct in passing as prescribed when there is no rule? Is there a rule existing today? No. What are you saying? As prescribed. Right? As prescribed. Now, if there is no rule and you say as prescribed means nothing is prescribed, therefore section is a non-starter. Now, because this is happening 900 times, I am conscious of the fact that no court is going to take this kind of a literal view. But is it correct? What was the difficulty in continuing as may be prescribed? In the context of section, which is that 14A, you had rule 8D. That 8D came 1 year after the section came. So question arose, in that 1 year period, when you had 14A on the statute, but you did not have rule 8D, did 14A apply? Or can I say, because there is no rule, I'm not going to apply 14A. Supreme Court said, no, you go ahead and apply it on some reasonable basis. But with the words as prescribed, it may be difficult to take the same view. Because there it was as may be prescribed. So they said, उसने prescribe नहीं किया, ठीक है. Whatever is the fair basis, वो लेके amount disallow करो. Disallow तो करना है तुमको. Right? But today, with the words as prescribed, I do not know whether that's going to happen. The next thing you have done is, in accordance with, has been replaced with as per. What's the logic? I have no idea. One way could be 3 word की जगह 2 word हो गया. So बार बार जहाँ in accordance with बोलना था वहाँ as per हो गया. They are saying it's easy to understand. I do not know if I ask some student that disallowance has to be in accordance with section 10 or disallowance has to be as per section 10. Is it one and the same or no? If the answer is it is one and the same, then why do you change it to in accordance with? I mean, what have you achieved? I can give you what has been lost. I can give you an example of what has been lost. If you go to the definition of dividend, it says buyback in accordance with section 68 of the Companies Act today, which has been changed to say buyback as per section 68. Okay? Now come to Companies Act. Companies Act buyback provision in section 68. तो अगर आपने 68 के हिसाब से buyback किया तो as per 68 हो ही गया. But when you go to 230 of the Companies Act, subsection 10 also gives you a buyback provision. And it says buyback should be in accordance with section 68. So Companies Act in 230 says buyback should be in accordance with 68. यहाँ पे है आपका as per. पहले दोनों in accordance with थे. So therefore I could have argued that if there is a buyback under 230, that also is in accordance with 68 because 230 itself refers to in accordance with 68. But now some officer will tell me, boss, that is in accordance with 68. This is as per 68. दोनों अलग होता है. I will not say this. The officer will disallow. And I'll have to then argue, no, in accordance with and as per is one and the same. What are you going to achieve? What's your objective? Reducing litigation. Are you reducing litigation? Go home and take definition of dividend in the bill. Try to read it. Try to understand it. I think it's nearly 1.5 page definition. Dividend includes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6 something. A, B, C, D, E. But does not include 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then that 5 has got A and B. And then it says where? 1, 2, 3. Now, to understand one word dividend, this is how you have defined. And you say things are easy in this country. I mean, it cannot be made easy. I am conscious of the fact. But then don't say that I want to make it easy and therefore mutilate it further. All that I am saying is what was going on was fine. I mean, nothing wrong. You remove redundant things. You make sure execution is proper. Wherever little bit was required, what is wrong with the provisos and explanation, I do not understand. Today, the law does not have a single proviso, law does not have a single explanation. But does it mean they have gone? The answer is no. They are very much there. They are as part of subsection. Now, principle of interpreting a subsection is different from principle of interpreting a proviso. A proviso carves out an exception. Subsection is a substantive provision. How can I read something which was meant to carve out an exception as a substantive provision? Maybe I can in some cases, but in some cases I cannot. Have the explanations gone? No. You have said where, comma, and then you have given number 1, 2, 3. What is that where, comma? Instead of the word explanation as the prefix, you have put where. उसको explanation नाम देने की जगह आपने उसके आगे word where लगा दिया, and now you are saying कि all explanations are gone, so law has become easy. Law doesn't become easy just by changing explanation to a where. Let's look at some statistics before we deep dive into the subject proper. I am told existing act has been amended 65 times with more than 4,000 amendments. Is anybody giving me an assurance that this number will not be the same in future? Or that we are not going to amend it? You are bound to amend it. There are reasons, you are giving those. You are explaining in FAQs why the law became so mutilated. Are all those reasons not valid going forward also? If the reasons are valid, your new law also will become the same. Or you can tell me every 5 years I am going to come out with a new income tax law. That's also fine. Say कि 5 बरस तक मैं tolerate करूँगा, हर 5 year के बाद I will come out with a new law. Okay, then one thing is commendable, that along with the introduction of the bill, they came out with frequently asked questions. And they also came out with a press release. Now the fact that you had to come out with FAQs on the very next day means that there were so many questions that you had to come out with FAQs the very next morning is what some people are joking. Now honestly, those are not FAQs. Those are basically an executive summary of what is contained in the finance bill, presented in the form of a question and answers, maybe wrongly titled as frequently asked questions. If those of you who have noticed, they are not signed, they are not dated, they're just there on the website. We take it for granted that these are official statements. Nobody has said these are official statements. Okay, effort has been made for linguistic simplification but also structural rationalization. I do not know which structure is better and which is better. A moving ahead of B could be one thing, A and B moving together could be another thing, B moving ahead of A could be third. Somebody may prefer first, second or third. I mean, it's a matter of personal choice whether this structure is better or that structure is better. Now you have 60,000 man hours have gone, fine, commendable, I said that. I mean, 536 sections, 23 chapters against 47. Okay. Now when you go into these 23 chapters, I've counted, there are parts. If you take each part as a separate chapter, it's going to 75. Okay. But I have not counted कि आगे वाले के parts निकाल देंगे तो क्या होगा. That time was not there. But this 23 is becoming something near 75. You have 16 schedules against, you have 2.6 lakh words against 5.12 lakh words. Very good. Now what have you done? Okay, I'm asking you a question. Can we from today or from 1/4/26 say कि Income Tax Act 1961 भूल जाओ, नहीं चाहिए अभी अपने को, निकाल दो ऑफिस में से उसको? नहीं, सवाल ही नहीं. 10 साल तक इसके बच्चे भी यूज करने वाले हैं जो अभी आने वाला है प्रोफेशन में. Why am I saying this? I'm conscious of what I'm saying. Why am I saying this? When you read your 25 law, इनकम के डेफिनेशन में वो लिस्ट देता है पूरा और फिर बोलता है एनी अदर आइटम ऑफ इनकम विच इज नॉट कवर्ड अबव बट इज देयर इन 224 ऑफ 1961 एक्ट. हाँ, आर यू नॉट कॉन्फिडेंट ऑफ व्हाट यू हैव कॉपी पेस्टेड? 224 में लिस्ट है और उसको कंपेयर कर देना कि वहां पे जो है सब आ गया कि नहीं आ गया. नहीं आ गया तो डाल दे अभी. बट नो, यू आर सेइंग कि अगर कुछ छूट गया और वहां था तो वो भी आएगा इधर. सो देयरफॉर आई नीड दैट. व्हेन यू गो टू शेड्यूल्स, they are referring to Income Tax Act exhaustively. The various provisions referring to various sections of Income Tax Act. And those references are not something which I need only in transition. Those references are going to, like, ये income की definition में जो clause है तो हमेशा रहने वाला है और हमेशा relevant है. Okay. Language simplified, 57 table. Yeah, this is very good. You have used formulas, you have used tables. Instead of writing 8 lines, 10 lines, today you have said A into B upon C, where A is equal to this, B is equal to this, and C is equal to this. It's the same thing, but it's easier to read, it's easier to grasp. Now somebody who's weak in maths may say, नहीं नहीं, A into B upon C तो नहीं आप समझता, वो better था. Fine, I mean, but by and large I would believe A into B upon C. Tables are better. Again and again we are told that there are no major policy related changes. The one major change, that is changeover from previous year and assessment year to a concept called as tax year. Okay. So what have we done? Now when is the new law coming? 1/4/26 for tax year 26-27. Therefore, up to 31/3/26 you are going to be under your present law. So income earned in financial year 25-26 will be taxed as income of assessment year 26-27 to which 1961 law will apply. Income earned from 1/4/26 will be taxed as income of tax year 26-27. So बोलने के लिए 26-27 है, लेकिन एक assessment year है और एक tax year. Under today's law, I earned income in the previous year, I pay tax in the assessment year. Very well settled position that law prevailing on the first day of the assessment year applies. Correct? Now what is going to happen? जो मैं इनकम कमाते गया, ईयर खत्म हुआ, उसके बाद फर्स्ट डे ऑफ असेसमेंट ईयर स्टार्टेड एंड द सुप्रीम कोर्ट टोल्ड मी लॉ प्रिवेलिंग ऑन द फर्स्ट डे ऑफ द असेसमेंट ईयर अप्लाइज. टुडे आई एम ऑन द कंसेप्ट ऑफ tax year. I am on the concept of tax year. Now, therefore, law prevailing on which day will apply? Will it be law prevailing on the first day of the tax year before I have started the earning the income? Or will it be law prevailing on the last day of the tax year? That means when I earn income, I don't know what the law is. I earn income, I win a lottery in the month of April. That winning from lottery is not income on the day I earned, if you go by last day of the year. But subsequently there is an amendment and it becomes taxable. Therefore, on the last day of the tax year, winning from lottery is taxable. So, I mean, can you have a law that I will decide what is taxable or not after you have earned it? Answer is obviously no. Therefore, logically, if you ask me logically, I am taking things as they are flowing. Logically, what should it be? Logically, it would depend on each type of income or each head of income. For example, when you go to business income, what is the position? For business income, we are told that the profits accrue at the end of the year. Therefore, law for business income logically should be law prevailing on the last day of the year. But when you come to salary, we tax it on due or receipt, whichever is early. Right? I have a right to receive salary on a particular day of the month. So that day of the month should decide the taxing event. Which law will be governed? Go to capital gains. Capital gains accrue on transfer of the asset. So law prevailing on the date of transfer. Are we simplifying the things or are we complicating the things? I mean, if what I am saying or what I am calling it logical is really logical and is upheld, is it making life easy or is it making life more difficult? Possible judiciary may come out with some different interpretation, but that will take its own time because some tribunal will decide, then there will be another tribunal deciding contrary, then we'll have a high court, then we'll have a different high court, and then we'll have a Supreme Court, and ultimately it is going to take 15 or 20 years to decide which law applies. I mean, so are we in for ease of business or what are we in for? Okay. Coming to this notwithstanding and irrespective business. As I said, wherever you had notwithstanding, it's made irrespective. Now, notwithstanding, in legal terms we call it as non obstante. Notwithstanding what is stated in section 45(1), capital gain arising on conversion or transfer of a capital asset to stock in trade will be charged to tax so and so. 45(5) is non-obstante 45(1). So when we say notwithstanding, what are we saying? If there is a conflict between the earlier one and this one will prevail. Am I correct? Notwithstanding means what? Overriding. Therefore, he stands, but I override him. When you come to irrespective, what do you mean? What do you mean? Dictionary says by and large same, but कुछ तो फर्क है ना, दो word अलग है तो. What is the meaning of irrespective? Irrespective of so and so section means ignore that section. Now when you write irrespective of anything containing any other provision in this act, if irrespective means ignore, I ignore section 2 also. I ignore everything. So how do I understand your law? Therefore, non-obstante was appropriate, notwithstanding was appropriate, because notwithstanding said you also exist, I also exist. But to the extent there is a conflict between you and me, I will prevail. That was the meaning of non-obstante, notwithstanding, irrespective does not necessarily give me that shade of meaning. Therefore, it is very, very necessary for organizations to make a representation and say, come out with a circular and tell me कि जहाँ भी irrespective है उसका meaning notwithstanding ही होगा. Because unless you do this, there is going to be mind-boggling litigation on every aspect. Okay. Now provisos and explanations, this I told you there were 1200 provisos, 900 explanations, now everything is gone. Now they have taken a power to remove difficulties. Good that you have taken the power and you think of removing difficulty, but you have taken a power to modify the Income Tax Act 1961. Now why do you need that power? In the new bill, you need a power to modify your old law for a period prior to. I do not know why they want this, but they have taken it. So I must be conscious of this. Okay. Now there is a repeal and a savings clause, obviously, which is 536. There are about 22 items which they have saved. They have said, okay, this is going to be the position for these items. And then they have also said that this is all subject to Section 6.3 of the General Clauses Act. Section 6.3 of the General Clauses Act deals with savings and repeal. Whenever there is a law which gets, repealed and another law comes. This is your 536. If you ask me the most important section, I'll say go and read 536. For next couple of years, this is going to be the most important. Because, think what will happen. After 31/3/26, you are going to file return of AY 26/27, which is going to be under which law? Old law. There would have been assessments which will be ongoing on 31/3/26. Right? Those assessment orders will be under which law? Old. तो उसका penalty कहाँ आएगा? Old. Therefore, I cannot disband the old law. There will be searches happening. Some search may even happen on 31st March 26. Right? To that search or the search whose last authorization is on 31st March 26, which law is going to apply? You are very clearly saying उसका तो return भी बाद में जाएगा, assessment भी 3 बरस बाद होगा, लेकिन वो सबके लिए भी old law apply होगा. That's why I said कि we cannot, say goodbye to 1961 law. We will have to welcome 2025 law, but we'll have to be friends and remain friends with 1961 law as well. So it is not that one friend going out and one friend coming in on the Facebook. It is one more friend being added. Okay. Now, are there any structural changes? No major structural changes. Concepts are same. Computation got same 4 heads. You have exempt provisions, except that section 10 and section 11, which was a lengthy section, has moved into schedules. Your concept of gross total income all remain the same. The only thing is some exemptions has moved as deductions. Something which was in the exemption section has now moved into a deduction section. Example, all the retirement benefits of employees, gratuity, pension, leave encashment, all that was part of section 10. Now they are part of deduction section under the head salaries. That by itself has created some difficulty. We'll come to that. I am told language is simplified, fine. Okay, now I told you about notwithstanding, I told you about as may be prescribed in accordance with I told you. Now wherever earlier you had 30% written in the law, it was written as I have written in the first line. Now they write is as 30 in numbers with a percentage sign. Now somewhere they do this, somewhere they don't do this. Now the only logical reason which came to my mind is that some officers followed the instruction, some officers did not follow the instruction. we have certain features in the journal which more than one of us write. Like, tribunal news, BCA ka. There are three of us. We have a standard sheet given by BCA, what to follow, how to write. But sometimes I follow, sometimes I don't follow, somebody else follows it religiously, right? Therefore, there happens to be a difference. Even when you read tribunal news, under section, if I have digested, I write full UNDERACCTION. When the instruction clearly to me is U stroke S likho. Right? I know that's the instruction, but out of habit, because in my office, in my opinions, useful. Now, similar thing has happened over here. Though the mandate may have been to write numeral with a mathematical sign, some places it has remained. Does not make much difference to me. Now, on or before 31st July, means kya? 31st July tak kiya to be compliant hai. Right? Now they say up to. Now what does up to mean? Up to mean what? Up to that date means what date ko kiya to correct, wrong. You file your return up to 31st July. Up to 31st July means 31st July ko return file kiya ho, valid, not valid? Valid should be the answer. Rightly, wrongly, you have a very old decision which says that whether or not last date is to be taken will depend on the intention of the parties. And where parties agree or justice demands last date may be included, may not be included. Now this decision is good enough to start a controversy. Why have on or before mein kya taklif tha? Is on or before not much clearer than up to? I would agree कि up to 31st July means 31st को किया तो भी ठीक है. Like Vijay said, put your confirmations up to the previous night. So even if somebody put it last night at 11 o'clock, he was justified possibly. Maybe at 12:01 he was not justified in adding that confirmation. Correct? Therefore, I would understand it that way. But rightly or wrongly, we have that decision of the court. Now, if that decision prevails and some officer takes a view, कि नहीं 31st को form भरा, form is not valid, litigation will start. And what are we going to fight? Up to का meaning क्या? What are we going to do now? We don't have better things probably to do, so we are going to learn English now. Okay. Now, let's leave this. Okay, we'll proceed. Okay, there will be interest which will be pending. There will be appeals of earlier years which will be decided. So if I win an appeal, I will get interest. That interest will be partly for a period up to 31st March and partly for a period after 31st March, right? Now, will I get interest or no? First year, will somebody tell me, oh, law gaya, abhi jao. The law itself is not there. It is saved. The savings clause contains that. I will get up to 31st March 26, I will get it in accordance with the old law, but after or on or from 1st April 26, I'll get it in accordance with the new law. The act is repealed. It is repealed. It is repealed. 536(1) very clearly says that. Section 536, subsection 1 of Income Tax Act 2025 when enacted is saying that very clearly. It was there in our earlier slide also. Okay. If it is not repealed, you cannot have two acts dealing with income tax. Okay. Now, yeah, here itself it is 536(1) repeals the Income Tax Act 1961. Okay, 536(2) has the savings, about 22 items there. Now, there will be questions like limitation period expired under the old law, but a longer limitation period is available under the new law. Will the officer get a power to say, okay, under the present law I have time? Say for example, it's a hypothetical example. Okay, under old law, reassessment can happen for 6 years. But if new law says, it is not saying so, but I am saying if it says 8 years, can officer reopen? The answer would be no. If some action has lapsed under the old law, it has lapsed. But अगर वहाँ 6 नहीं हुए थे, 5 ही बरस हुए थे, तो ये आदमी 8 तक जा सकता है. Okay. Now there are many things, though they are saying no policy changes, there are many things which they have changed. Possibly they say we said no major policy changes. Therefore, everything which is a policy change and is happening because of a change in language is a minor policy change, maybe according to them. But everything is not so minor, trust me. We're going to come to slides where we will see major changes are also happening. Now, did you think of all this between July and today? It was on 23rd July, that 2024, that the budget was presented, and we were told that we are going to give you a new law. Right? You brought out Finance Bill 2025. This law considers all amendments proposed by the Finance Bill 2025 also. Plus there are some things more. Now those some things more, did you visualize today? If the answer is no, why do you bring it here? You should have brought it as a part of Finance Bill 2025. Now you may say, what difference does it make to you? 6 महीने बाद में बताया तो क्या तकलीफ होता है आपको? तकलीफ ये होता है कि today there is no explanatory memorandum. If you would have brought the changes in Finance Bill 25, you would have explained to me in an explanatory memorandum कि boss, this is the position is X. Now I am making these changes and therefore position is now going to be Y. What is the reason for changing from X to Y? You would have given me a reason. Today what is it? I don't even know. I have to sit with the old law. I have to sit with the new law. I have to compare word by word. Wherever there is a change, I have to visualize and imagine why perhaps this change occurs. I don't know why it occurs. But had you done it in Finance Bill 25, you would have given me an explanatory memorandum explaining me the reasons. So I would have known what you are doing. Also today, I do not know whether I stop at this change or it has a consequential effect somewhere else also. For example, I'll give you. When I compare 148 and 148 capital A with the corresponding new provisions, I find that GAR panel ka action or a decision of a tribunal, court, etc. in some other case, a direction is going to now constitute information available with the AO, which was not there earlier. मान लिया चलो, वो 2 आइटम दिखा मुझे. I went to 148A to check उसमें क्या चेंज है. तो उसमें चेंज क्या मिला? उसमें ये चेंज मिला कि if these two situations happen, then he does not have to follow the procedure of 148 capital A. Then I went to 149. When I go to 149, the time limits are broadly the same. I could have stopped over there. But there is a new section which says that in these two type of situation, forget the time limit, we can do it at any time. Provided 1-2. I mean, that provided 1-2 may, if there is a court decision in context of some other law, the reopening period can be 10 years, 15 years, whatever. So these are all major changes. Had you brought it over there, I would have known what you are doing and where you are doing. Today I have to search. If I do not read the full law, I may not be aware that there is this change also, which is consequential to adding of these two clauses in 148 definition, impacting 148A, impacting some other provision as well. Forget me, even your officers may not be knowing it. I mean, okay. Okay, now this you can, MAT credit, if I have got pending, can continue. If I have exercised some option under the old law, that option is going to continue under the new law. It will be regarded as an option. Then deduction. Okay, now let's come to chapter by chapter. Each chapter I will take one or two points just to explain what things are, so that you get a glimpse of what's happening. Now, हम लोग पहले definition बोलते थे. Now that definition is calling it as interpretation. Okay, a new word, fancy word. Earlier I had only one definition section. Now I have 12 separate sections with the heading interpretation. So in section 2 you have interpretation, which has got 112 definitions. Earlier, possibly you had 89 definitions, even if you counted 242A to be different from 242C, etc. Whatever. Okay, so as against 89, you have 112. But when you go to the chapter, business or profession, the last section is 66. That has got 45 separate definitions. So these are examples of only 2 interpretation sections. There are 10 more interpretation sections. Plus, therefore now I have to think where is this word defined. Plus you have many places where they say where and then they define for the purpose of this chapter. For the purpose of this part, this word shall mean this. Therefore, you're not stopping at 12 also. So now that you have had 12 interpretations, you could have merged them and brought it at 2. But then again, somebody may say this is better, that is better. I myself told you in the beginning, A is better than B or B. I mean, A following B or B following A is a matter of personal choice. Like, what should follow what. Okay. Now, let's come to the first. Assessment ka definition. Today, in section 2 clause 8, we are told assessment includes reassessment. Correct? So reassessment kiya, to be it is same thing as assessment. The corresponding clause is 2 into bracket 13, which says assessment includes reassessment and recomputation. Therefore, now when somebody is doing a recomputation, it is the same thing as he is doing assessment. Therefore, what? Therefore, many things can happen. Limitation period, rectification. There could be several implications with this one consequence. Earlier it was assessment includes reassessment. Now you are saying assessment includes reassessment and recomputation. Somebody may say computation का क्या? Recomputation तो assessment में आया, लेकिन original computation assessment में आया क्या नहीं आया? Assessment includes reassessment and recomputation. But what about computation? That by itself, I mean, to my mind, computation even earlier was covered within assessment, and therefore they did not think it fit to define. Now look at this definition of relative. Under the present law, I am told relative in relation to individual means husband, wife, brother, sister, lineal ascendant or descendant. Now what is he doing? Everything is the same except after ascendant, in bracket he says maternal or paternal. Therefore maternal ascendant hoga to bhi ascendant, paternal ascendant hoga to bhi ascendant, right? Or descendant. Now after descendant, there is no maternal paternal. Correct? We will later come to a different section where after descendant also they have put, and in one place before after ascendant they have not put. We'll come to that. But my point is that bracketed portion required for descendant? See, ascendant means क्या? Ascendant means क्या? ऊपर का. So ऊपर का could have been maternal side वाला या paternal side वाला. Descendant means क्या? Children, I understand, grandchildren. Now grandchildren could be from my son's branch, could be from my daughter's branch, right? Therefore, are both descendants? Or now the controversy will be no, वहां तुमने बोला ascendant descendant दोनों, यहाँ दोनों नहीं बोला, तो यहाँ मैं जो choose करूँगा वही descendant होगा. See, earlier nothing was there in brackets. Now at one place you're putting, either put it at other place, but where maternal paternal does not make sense, because he is my descendant, he is ascendant from maternal side or paternal side, but he is not my maternal descendant or paternal descendant. Okay, so there will have to be some other English language word which you are going to use, if at all you want to use. Otherwise, there is, if I recall, there is an old Andhra Pradesh High Court decision which said lineal ascendant means straight line में ऊपर जाने का. So I could not have gone to my mother's side. that was a decision in the context of succession law, which was applied, and therefore there was some controversy as to whenever you say ascendant, to kya ascendant? I mean, from my father's side only or from my mother's side also? I mean, that is one decision I am aware of.
So when it says descendant of that individual, you have to read above which individual. So
Correct.
obviously covers.
What?
For the descendant also. If you read the English, it says or the descendant of that individual.
Which individual?
That
Jiska relative, not ascendant ka.
See, no, it says the relative in relation to an individual means all this.
Correct.
Or
So descendant of what?
of that individual.
Correct.
That individual means read above again that individual only.
So individual, na? I am not getting into the paternal maternal.
Reads both.
Okay. Now come to jewelry. We have the definition of capital asset today. Capital asset includes jewelry, personal effects in other than jewelry, right? Personal effects is excluded, but in personal effects I am told other than jewelry, right? Now what is the definition of jewelry? You are told ornaments made of gold, silver, platinum or any other precious metal or any alloy containing one or more such precious metal. So कोई भी alloy जिसमें one or more precious metal है will become jewelry, correct? So सोना, चांदी, उसके साथ में पीतल, तांबा, तो भी it is jewelry, right? Now come to what they have done. Ornaments made of gold, silver, platinum or any other precious metal or alloy of such precious metal. Therefore, the minute you add little bit of pital or tamba into it, it is not jewelry. Is this your intention? Is this your intention? The answer is undoubtedly not. But this is the consequence of when you tinker with the language. You should have allowed the same thing. वो possibly क्या करने गया? Reduce the number of words. उसका mandate था reduce the number of words, तो reduce करने गया mandate. Let me finish with definitions. Okay. Now there was a definition of stamp duty value. Now 50C said that whenever full value of consideration is less than the value determined by authority of state government for the purpose of levy of stamp duty, right? So it was authority of the state government. Central government was not concerned. But when you came to 56(2)(10), authority of central and state both were covered. Stamp duty value was relevant at various places in the law. In 56(2)(10), stamp duty value could have been determined by authority of state or authority of central government. But when it came to 50C and 43CA, it was only authority of state government. There was no authority of central government. So in a, what do I call it, a place in the country which was not a state, say for example union territories, they are not states. Therefore stamp 50C and 43CA did not apply there technically. Right? But now they have changed it. They have shifted the definition to section 2 instead of 50C. I mean, now 50C refers to the word stamp duty value. They have defined it over here. Okay, now look at this. Stamp duty value means the value adopted or assessed or assessable. Assessable ka meaning kya? Earlier, there was an explanation below section 50C which gave you the definition of assessable. Use the word assessable and gave you the meaning of the word assessable in the explanation. Today, there is section 78 which defines assessable for the purpose of this section. It says for the purpose of this section, assessable ka meaning ye. Now if you read that section over and over again, वहाँ पे accessible word है ही नहीं. So 78 is defining accessible for the purpose of 78, but there is no accessible word in 78 at all. Okay. Now these are all obvious things which should have been noticed. It is not that I have done a great job, or if I can notice, you will read, you will also notice. Anybody reads, anybody will notice. It's nothing but a comparison of the two provisions. It is again, as I said, time available with the officers for second read, third read was not there, and or rather the same person reads again and again. If I read same thing second time, third time, quite unlikely that I will find new mistakes. But if you read, then you may find my mistake. You may say, okay, you have not caught this. Okay, this is accessible. I already told you this. 42C, which is the definition of the term sum sale. Now there was a controversy as to whether the provisions dealing with capital gains on slump sale applied only to a slump sale or applied to slump exchange as well. The Mumbai Tribunal, followed by Bombay High Court in Bharat Bijli's case, said that no, the provisions of slump sale will apply only if there is a sale of an undertaking, and if there is an exchange, the provisions of slump sale will not apply. In 9 out of 10 transactions, it is not a case of slump sale, it is always a case of slump exchange. And therefore the provisions failed according to the judiciary. So consequent to that, there was an amendment. Earlier, 242C in the Act said, slump sale means transfer of one or more undertaking by any means as a result of sale. So the language was transfer of one or more undertaking as a result of sale. So transfer had to happen only as a result of sale. After this decision of the Bombay High Court in Bharat Bijli, law was changed. And they said, no, it is transfer of one or more undertaking not as a result of sale, but by any means. By any means. And simultaneous, they introduced explanation 3. Yeah, explanation 3 said, for the purpose of this clause, transfer will mean have the same definition as it has in 247. So 2 changes, one at the top, one insertion of the explanation. Now we are moving from the Act to the bill. Now what are we doing? We have retained over there transfer of one or more undertaking by any means. That language is the same, but the explanation is missing. Okay, now why did you lose track of the explanation? Are you again giving rise to a controversy that slump sale is something different than slump exchange? Possibly, the officers are confident that the word transfer used there is a defined term, and therefore it has to take the meaning from the definition itself, and therefore explanation is not required. But earlier the explanation was there. And when you inserted an explanation, there was a purpose. It is not that explanation was always there. Because of some judicial pronouncement, you carried out 2 amendments. Number 1, as a result of sale got substituted by any means. And second, you also inserted an explanation. Today you are saying explanation is not required. What was the harm if the explanation was there? You could have avoided litigation, but now no. And possibly, if I am stuck somewhere, I am going to argue, okay, what is the purpose of deleting the explanation? It was there. Now it is not there. Because court says any action of the judiciary has a purpose. When law uses 2 different words, they have 2 different meanings. No word is surplus in the law. No word which is necessary is deleted from the law. So you are making a conscious change, something which was there, now you are saying is not required. So court will examine what was your purpose. As I said earlier, had you given me explanatory memorandum, it would have been a different thing. I know your intention. Today I have to guess what is your intention. Okay. Now this we did. Okay. Now company in which public are not substantially interested is defined now. It normally means a listed company is always a company in which public are substantially interested. If the company is not listed on a recognized stock exchange on 31st of March or last day of the year, then if it satisfies two conditions cumulatively, then it becomes a company in which public are substantially interested, shares, etc. Now, when you come to the amendment in clause 229, the or has got replaced by and by mistake. Instead of or, they have replaced and. Now what is happening is, necessarily a company has to be a listed company to become a company in which public are substantially interested. Now this will mean that a lot many companies will now get out of this definition and will be get captured by the term company in which public are not substantially interested, because many of your provisions apply to a company in which public are not substantially interested. Therefore, I should get out of here to get in over there, and those are all strict provisions possible now, unless they rectify it at the act stage. If this continues as it is going to be only listed companies which will qualify as company in which public are substantially interested. Okay, that and they have to replace it by or now if they want to come back to the original position. Okay. Now this is again another major thing. Now demerger is defined. In relation to companies, means transfer pursuant to a scheme of arrangement under section 391 to 394 of Companies Act 1956. So the reference is to Companies Act of 1956 today. 56 became 2013. Now when you go to 2013 law, possibly there is a debate that when you say 391 to 394, does it mean 230 to 232, or does it mean 230 to 233? Because section 233 of the Companies Act 2013 is a fast track demerger or fast track merger. There was no concept of fast track under the old law or 1956. So when you shifted from 56 law to 2013 law, you retained a reference of 56 law in the income tax law. Therefore, any which ways the argument was going on as to whether a fast track demerger qualifies as a demerger or not, it was possible for me to take a view that 391 to 394 of the Companies Act 1956 corresponds to 230 to 233 of the Companies Act 2013, and therefore my demerger or my merger, even though it is under 233 of the Companies Act 2013, qualifies as with the corresponding provisions of the 1956 Act, and therefore I must have tax neutrality in this transaction. But now what they are doing? Today, since 56 law is not there, they are giving a reference of 2013 law. But when they are giving reference of 2013 law, they are giving reference of only 230 to 232. They are not including 233. Therefore now, question will be, all companies will choose that we don't want to go by a fast track merger or demerger. Why? Because there will be a controversy in income tax as to whether that fast track demerger or merger qualifies for tax neutrality under the tax provisions or not. Possible that some councils are going to take a view that no, 233 on a standalone basis does not exist. It is only a subset of 230 to 232. But all this is a matter of argument. All this is matter of convincing the court that 233 is a subset. You want fast track mergers, you want fast track demergers. That is your intention. That is why you have 233 in the statute. Why not make it 233 over here and finish the controversy? But be that as it may, I mean, it's their choice. If they leave it like this, there's going to be a controversy on the fast track thing. Okay. Fine. This tax year thing we have dealt with, of course. Nevertheless, let us look at the definition. Your tax year definition coincides with the definition of previous year. Tax year is the period starting on the day when you commence a new business or a new source of income comes into existence and ending with immediately succeeding 31st of March. Therefore, your tax year can never be a period more than 12 months. It will start sometime for a particular source and it will always end on 31st of March. That's your definition of the tax year. Now, section 4 today, charges to tax. Income of the previous year, but it is charged to tax in the assessment year at the rates mentioned in the Central Act. Now that they have not changed. See, rates traditionally were always given by the Central Act. Then you said, no, for dividend I want a separate rate. Then you said for capital gains I want 112 rate. For short-term capital gain in respect of listed securities I want a different section. And now of course you have 115 BAC and all that. But conventionally, in 1922 law also, the rates of tax always came from the Finance Act or by any central act. Rates are never given by the Income Tax Act. So a question of fundamental importance can arise as to whether can rates be there in the Income Tax Act itself. I mean, a big question mark. All that was required is make the provisions subject to the provisions of the Act. If you make them subject to the provisions of the Act say that this is the rate which I am going to apply as far as capital gains etc. is concerned. Right? Under the 1918 Act, before your 1922 law, there was an Income Tax Act of 1918. In 1918 Act, yes, the Income Tax Act provided the rates of tax. I mean, the rates were there in the Act itself and they were not coming from the separate central law. This is your present 4.1. Income tax for any tax year shall be charged as per provisions of this Act at the rates enacted by Central Act. You should have said at the rate enacted by Central Act or at the rates mentioned in this Act, because your main charge is by 4.1. 4.2 says the charge of income tax shall be on total income of every person as per the provisions of this Act, right? So this I have already explained you as to law prevailing on which state will apply. Okay. Now come to residential status. We'll go a little bit fast. Now see this typing or drafting mistakes. An individual is said to be resident in India in previous year if he 1, 2, 3, whatever. 182 days, 60 days, 365, whatever. Now what has he done? For the purpose of this Act, residence of a person in India. Those words in India are not required. Because if a person is not in India, then this section itself will not apply. So you'll have to delete these words in India which have wrongly crept in over here, because otherwise you are defeating the object itself. Next. Today, you have, this is the section from today's law, which says that in 6.1c it is said that individuals should be in India in that year for a period of periods amounting to 60 days or more, and in 4 years preceding that year. Now 4 years preceding that year, therefore if you take financial year 24-25, whose residential status I want to check, then 4 years preceding, logically, and I mean we all understand 4 preceding are immediately preceding. 24-25 के immediately पहले जो 4 आते हैं, but the word immediately is not there even today. Ideally they should have put it, they have not put it. Because preceding could mean any preceding. 4 years preceding that year. So 18-19 is also a year preceding that year, right? But what they mean and what we all understand from our BCom days is that we have to take the immediately preceding years. So, but that word immediately is not there. Again, there is a significance of the word period or periods. Now when you say, I must be in India for a period or periods amounting to 60 days means what? 60 days at a stretch चलेगा, 6 days करके 10 times भी चलेगा, right? 1 day करके 60 बार भी चलेगा, if I mean you're talking of Bombay, Dubai or whatever you want, right? So that is the significance of the word period or periods. That's one. Second is, look at the explanation. It says being a citizen of India who reached India in that previous year for the purpose of employment abroad. Employment outside India, then 60 in relation to that year, 60 shall get substituted by 182 or whatever. Okay. Now these are two different things, two different issues. One is period or periods now get substituted by total period in the first clause. I am comparing the second one, right? 60 days wala. So 60 days wale ke liye he is using the word cumulatively. Now what is the meaning of cumulatively? Cumulatively means more than one. Cumulative means more than one. Therefore, if it is continuous one, I will argue this does not satisfy. You had a word period or periods, और 3 word का एक करने का. See, his objective is reduce words, reduce words. तो period or periods 3 words. He wanted 1 word. उसका count कम करने के लिए. So he used the word cumulative, and this is what happens. Cumulative necessarily implies more than one. I mean, there could be a debate. Somebody can say, no, one also is cumulative, but that is going to be litigative now. If you kept it period or periods, it was a settled position, it is clear. But with the anxiety to reduce those 2 words, you've done this. Day you go out of India for the purpose of employment, in the current year for calculating your residential status, we will see whether you were in India for 182 days or no. So if you left India in September, you will not satisfy that test. Otherwise the difficulty happens, in that year your word income gets captured because of section 5. So to give a concession, this provision is there. Okay, now see what they have done. For the purpose of employment, they have changed it to for employment outside India. Appears to be innocuous change, far-reaching implication. For the purpose of employment. So for the purpose of Uradia. The purpose of Uradia. He's saying for employment. Now the meaning changes. For employment means what? For employment means I have an employment there and I am leaving India to join a company over there. Whereas if I went out to appear for an interview, then it was I am leaving India for the purpose of employment. Today that is not going to be possible. Second, I thought I am a successful tax practitioner here. Let me try Dubai as a market. I go out in year 1 with a view to set up my practice. Possible to interpret that for the purpose of employment was wide enough even to cover own practice. But now, quite difficult. For employment outside India. Therefore, I must have a confirmed appointment letter and then I must leave and only then I will get covered. I mean, I will get the benefit. Now, all this is after effects of deletion of few words here and there.
Yesterday, Times of India has reported one judgment of ITIT of 122 days.
Of?
182 days. A gentleman was out of India for 280. ITO calculated it that his employment was 182 days, but he overstayed 28 days for looking out for another job, and his income of 90 lakhs earned in that country.
Got captured here.
Tax.
Correct.
ITIT yesterday
Correct.
reported given benefit to that gentleman.
Correct.
Yesterday, Times of India has reported. So, court, they said, yeah, number of days is important.
Okay.
Purpose is not only important.
Okay. This cumulative and all I told you. Okay. Now see, we have this Finance Act of 2021 introducing this 9B and 45(4), the most complicated provisions that we have. Since those provisions were new in 2021, CBDT took a power to issue guidelines to remove difficulties. And they did issue some guidelines. 9B gave a window of 2 years from 2021 to CBDT to issue guidelines. It also stated that the guidelines so issued will be binding both on the department as well as on the SSC. Now, why was those guidelines required? That is because in 2021 the section was new. You introduced something out of the box. Somebody's income was taxed as in the hands of somebody, etc. So you said, okay, we'll frame guidelines and we'll come out with them. We'll put them before the House of the Parliament. And also you said that whatever guidelines we frame will be binding both on the SSC as well as on the department. Now, I find no reason why you again need time to issue guidelines. Because what you have done, you copy pasted 9B from here over there. So whatever you did in 21, you are now repeating to begin with 26. Now if you want guidelines to remove difficulties for 9B, then you need guidelines for every other provision as well. But no, for 9B they have taken a specific power of 2 years from 1/4/26. Therefore up to 28, now they are saying again they will issue, they may issue guidelines. I'm not saying they are going to issue, but they've taken the power. But this time, they do not say that they will be binding on the SSC and the department. Earlier, it only said, okay, now also see, they are saying that the guidelines will be with the previous approval of the central government. Means what? Means before you issue the guidelines, you are going to go and get the approval of the government. It is not going to be post facto, क्या आज guideline issue की और कल, government के पास गया बाद में. It's not that kind of a thing. They clearly envisaging a prior approval. But what have they done now? They've continued that previous approval. If you see 8.4, it continues with the previous approval on the right hand side. But when you come to 8.6, what are they saying? They're saying we are going to issue the guidelines. We are going to place them before the houses of the parliament in 2 successive sessions if necessary, so that for a minimum period of 60 days they are before the house. And if the house decides that those guidelines are not required or that they should come in some modified form, then they shall either not come or they shall come in a modified form. But whatever is done before such amendment, etc., will remain valid. How is that ever going to happen? Because you are going to issue them only with the previous approval. Therefore, you have to first place them there. Only if they approve, you are going to issue them. So therefore, where is the question of the second part? This again implies that somebody has not reread the things. 8.4 says something, 8.6 is saying something else. And that part in the left hand side in red and shall be binding is not there in the present law. Therefore, are we saying that guidelines are not binding? Good if they are not binding on the SSC. But bad if you say that they are not binding on the authorities also. I don't think that is possible, because any guideline issued is always binding on the authorities. It may not be binding on me. Okay. Now, this is the head of income where you have got some concession. 116.2 giving deduction of 5,000 to government employees, deleted, small thing. Anyway, nobody was getting much out of it. Now, here is a part of the chapter where all your exemption provisions are moved over here as deduction. Therefore, your exemption under 10.10 for commutation of pension has also shifted over here. Yeah. Now, as a result, what happens? It is removed from section 10, it is brought over here. If I am a salaried employee receiving commuted pension, fine, I will get it as a deduction. You call it exemption, you call it deduction, फर्क नहीं पड़ता है ज़्यादा. Okay. But if I am a professional who is having an annuity policy from an insurance company like LIC, HDFC, etc., I get annuity. I commute that annuity which is possible under the insurance policy. I was able to claim exemption because it was under section 10. Now that you have moved the provision over here, what will happen to all non-salaried employees? What will happen to all those policies? I'm sure LIC, HDFC, all these insurance companies will take it up with the government and will make sure that appropriate amendment is effected. But if that does not happen, then this is again a major change. I mean, you should spell out, okay, this is the change I am making and this is the reason why I am making a change. Okay, you say, okay, I don't want to give a benefit. Up till now I gave you, enough, party is over now. But you cannot do it backdoor like this. Okay. Now this is something which is really useful. Today, if vehicle is provided by the employer for journey from my residence to place of office and back, then it is not a perquisite. But it is not a perquisite only if vehicle is provided by the employer. There was even a controversy as to where employer takes it on rent and provides me. Is it tax-free perquisite? The answer was yes. But if I took the vehicle on rent and employer reimbursed the rent to me, it was not exempt. If I travel by Ola, Uber or by this Kalipili taxi, etc., and my employer gives me a reimbursement, it was not a tax-free perquisite, so to say. Now that has been changed. Now the language is any expenditure incurred by the employer for use of any vehicle. So it could be use of Ola, Uber, use of Kalipili, use of my vehicle. As long as expenditure is incurred by the employer, it will not constitute a perquisite. The only significant welcome change which I have noticed. Okay, now non-monetary perquisites are taxable if income under the head salaries computed by taking only monetary benefits exceeds 50,000. That figure of 50,000 is now omitted and they say we will notify the figure from time to time. Therefore, they will upwardly revise this figure. Obviously, this 50,000 was quite an old figure, so this is again a welcome change. This was done in Finance Bill 25. We now come to house property. Now, today you have 22 to 27, then you will have 20 to 25. The words let continue with actually let. Now, I have till date not understood the difference between let and actually let. Reduce करने का तो actually काटो ना वहाँ से. Then they say occupied and actually occupied. Therefore, there is something called as let, there is something called as actually let. There is something called as occupied, there is something called as actually occupied. Therefore, I can occupy without actually occupying. Okay. Then they say actually paid. If I have paid contribution, what do you mean by actually paid contribution? I paid it, I paid it. I mean, what is actually paid and not actually paid? Right? So, they continue. Then for the first time we have a new phrase, let out in normal course. Now I have not understood what is let out in abnormal course. This was not there. You are introducing the words there. Let out. I'll explain the background. I'm first telling you what all they have changed. Okay. Now what is the law today? Or before I go to the law, the charging section for house property today is section 22. It charges to tax annual value of a property, being buildings or land appurtenant thereto, etc., of which assessee is owner, other than such portions of such property as he may occupy for the purposes of any business or profession carried on by him, profits of which are chargeable under the head profits and gains. This is your present section 22. Therefore, if you are occupying property for the purposes of your business or profession, profits of which are not chargeable to tax, that property is outside section 22 and therefore annual value of such property cannot be charged to tax. Therefore, if I am a CA who has offices at Bandra, Churchgate and Thane, and since last 3 years ever I have never visited Thane because no client came or I did not choose to give an appointment in Thane office, can I say that I am occupying all the three for the purpose of my employment or for the purpose of my business or profession, profits of which are chargeable? Answer would be yes. Right? Now, what they have done is, see below, as occupied by the SSE, for the purpose has gone. Therefore, now I will have to demonstrate that I am occupying for the purpose of my business or profession, and that profits of which are chargeable to tax, rest of the words in that word cutting, those words have gone. So business income may be taxed under any head. Now I can keep arguing all that, but this is a major change. What will happen is companies which have got surplus properties, which have been acquired keeping in mind the future business requirements or the future business plans, will probably enter into an litigation zone. The officer will say, you are not occupying this for the purpose of your business. Earlier it was he may. That may etc. is gone. Today you want a positive test. Right? I do not know whether this is simplification, reducing litigation, or what is happening. Okay, now yeah. Today what's the position? A, 23(1)(a) tells me that the fair rent of the property I have to consider as the annual value. B says, look here, if you have let out the property and the rent received or receivable is more than the fair rent, then consider that greater amount. Therefore, if my rent received or receivable is less than the fair rent, I will still go back to the fair rent even today. No quarrels on that. Then there is 23(1)(c), which says that where you have let out a property and which is vacant for whole or part of the previous year, and the amount of rent received is less because of the vacancy, then we will consider that lesser rent. Right? But only if that reduction in annual value is because of vacancy, otherwise I will today have to come back to the fair rent. Right? So today, if I have let out a property for a period of 2 months on a monthly rent of 50,000, I have received 1 lakh of rupees. The fair rent of that property is 75,000. Right? Therefore, had I given it on fair rent, I should have received 1 lakh and 50. I have received only 1 lakh. Therefore, this reduction is not on account of vacancy. This is on account of something else. Going by today's law, 150 would be taxable. Going by today's law. That they have given a concession. That they are saying that today if you have let out a property, under 26 law, 2025 bill, that if you let out a property for a part of the year, then whatever is the rent risk, they are saying we are not going to consider clause B. Now clause B is actual rent, etc. Therefore they are going by whatever you receive, they are going to accept it. Now this is inequitable. If I let out for full year, you are going to compare it with fair rent. But if I let out for part of the year, you are not going to do that. Number one. Number two, today controversy is whether where I have a property which is vacant for the full year, I intend letting it out, but I have not let it out at all. whether annual value can be 0 or not under 23(1)(c). The courts are taking a view that no, demonstrate to us that you took efforts to let out the property and you were not able to let out the property. That's the ratio of the decisions. Some court has gone ahead and said, no, you should have let it out for at least 1 year before, etc. I do not know where from they get all that. But basic principle therefore appears to be that you must first let out the property, which will demonstrate that the intention is to let it out. Then the property should remain vacant. Then demonstrate to us that you have taken efforts to let out the property, but you could not let it out. Then we will give you a concession of vacancy allowance. It is in that context that they are now using the word let out in normal course. Therefore, to get benefit of vacancy allowance, if I let out a property only for 15 days, or I let it out to my brother at a concessional rate for 6 months, etc., they will say this is not letting in normal course. Now, what is letting in normal, what is not letting in normal is a big question mark. It's a factual question, again giving rise to more litigation. That is why I said we will have enough scope for litigation in this country. Okay. Now you come to self-occupied property. When you come to self-occupied property, you have section 23, subsection 2, which says that the property must be in occupation of owner for the purpose of his own residence, and or it cannot actually be occupied by the owner only because of one reason. The reason is that because of his employment, business or profession carried on at any other place, he has to reside in that other place in a building not belonging to him. If these either of the two conditions is satisfied, then the annual value of this property is to be taken as nil. This is the position today. What is the corresponding position? The annual value of property consisting of house or part thereof shall be taken as nil if owner occupies it for his own residence, or cannot actually occupy it due to any other reason. Right? Therefore, this is again a concession. Earlier there was only one reason, now it can be any reason. So if I have 3 flats, I have given second and third flat to my daughters to stay. Right? Why have I given, am I charging them rent? Obviously not. She's my daughter, she's staying in the flat, fine. I mean, I have got surplus properties, if my daughter is staying, so what? Earlier, that was not a valid reason to claim nil under 23(2). There was some distant cousin of mine who was not well off, or who has come from some other place to settle in Bombay, did not have a house. I had an extra house which I was anyway reluctant to rent it out. I said, you go and occupy it, okay. I mean, once you get your house, once you get employment, you'll get your quarters, you move out. I trust him, I have given it. That was not good reason. Now it will become a good reason. Therefore, of course, I can do that only in respect of 2 properties, but nevertheless, it is some concession is there. Now earlier, you had 23(4), which told you that look here, if you have more than 2 self-occupied properties, then only for 2 we are going to consider it to be nil. For the others, we shall compute annual value as if it is let out. That is what we used to call it in our language as deemed let out. Okay. So there was an explicit provision in 23(4) that is missing now. That's missing now. Therefore, again, another controversy. I will say, where is the provision? Provision tha aapne nikala. Right? Kyun nikala? The answer is 23(1) is wide enough to cover कि fair rent will constitute annual value. That is going to be department's argument. But I will say earlier you had it, no, for all these years in 23(4). Now you have removed it. Therefore, why did you remove a particular provision which was there? Okay. Now these are the decisions to which I made a reference, daughter occupying, etc. Okay. Okay. Now this is again a controversy. From whatever we decide to be the annual value, we get deduction of property taxes paid. We get a deduction only if we paid during the previous year. If I have not paid it, I do not get it as a deduction. Now, what happens today is I start with an amount, I reduce property taxes, and whatever is the reduced figure, that we call it as annual value in law. In TMI BCom while teaching, we say the first one is gross annual value, second one is net annual value. There's nothing called as gross and net. वो स्टूडेंट को समझाने के लिए बोलते हैं खाली कि वो ग्रॉस है ये नेट है. Law has got only one word, annual value, which was clear in the proviso to 23(1), which said provided that taxes debit shall be deducted in determining the annual value. Therefore, to determine annual value, you have to deduct the taxes paid and the reduced amount becomes your annual value. Now look at the new provision. The annual value of property shall be reduced. Therefore, what will be reduced? Annual value. Therefore, आगे वाला figure annual value है. Reduction के बाद वाला नहीं. Right? तो reduce करके क्या करने का? No answer. Earlier, you were very clear कि while determining, you shall deduct. Today, what are you saying? The annual value shall be reduced. So what is that reduced figure? Is that annual value? You cannot have two annual values, one before reduction, one after reduction. Right? So this is going to be another area. The upside of this mistake. If I want to, can you finish it off once and for all, whatever you want to discuss? Yeah.
No, my question was if it was gross annual minus property taxes, so that one figure we are supposed to write, I mean calculate and then put it. That's what I just told him, should we put that particular figure? That's all.
It distracts me. Okay, now here today the upside of this mistake is that when I come to deduction under 24, they say 30% of annual value. I will say annual value is the upper figure, therefore I will claim 30% of that. I mean, that's the upside, but I don't think it's worth arguing and litigating. Also, today the position is for SOP, we never get municipal taxes because we say annual value is nil, right? Fair rent minus municipal tax, there's some figure, that figure gets substituted by nil because of 23(2). But now what will happen? I do not know. Because SOP nil came earlier, then he's saying annual value shall be reduced. Therefore, are you going to give me a loss house property which is SOP? No idea, no answer. Then, pre-construction period interest. Today, I get interest pertaining to a period prior to construction. I get a deduction in 5 equal installments coming from the year in which construction is complete. Right? So if I book a house today by taking a loan from HDFC, I will keep paying interest to HDFC, but the house is not there. Since house is not there, there is no annual value also. 5 years later, I get possession of the house. In that year in which I get possession, all the interest which I have incurred in earlier years qualifies as pre-construction period interest. I get a deduction of that pre-construction period interest in 5 equal installments. Right? Starting from the year in which construction is complete. I get that deduction whether the property is let out or the property is self-occupied or the property is deemed let out in today's terms. Now they are saying, no, we will give you that deduction only for self-occupied properties. We are not going to give you a deduction for let out. Therefore, is that interest going down the drain? The answer is no. You can continue adding it to your cost and claim it as and when you sell your house. And that provision is there very clearly in the clause corresponding to 48.
Under the current situation, also only 2 lakhs of interest is allowed.
That is for SOP. That continues.
Correct. So suppose if I am taking a housing loan, I am taking a house of 2 crore and paying suppose 10 lakhs of interest. 2 lakhs is allowed as a deduction. And I have the 8 lakhs.
Yeah, undoubtedly.
So in future then the LTC.
Undoubtedly.
So if people have not done this in the past, over the last 4-5 years you have not done it.
You can still do it, yeah.
So you manipulate the value of the asset now.
Sorry?
You manipulate the value of the asset. So if I've got a,
There's no question of manipulating.
no, the interest which I would have written off otherwise in my capital.
I have written it off, so what?
So now I'll add it back to my asset value.
Why? In my computation, I will claim it.
Okay.
Under
Why should I?
Under
Capital gains.
So 12.5% will give you a benefit.
There's no question of changing my accounts. My accounts and my tax are independent. My accounts cannot determine the allowability or otherwise.
So it's better to add the value of the interest to the value of the cost.
I don't know better or not better. I mean, better or not better, I do not know. You can add it, is I'll say. Okay, so let's leave that there. Let's come to business income for whatever. Yeah, I have about 10-15 minutes more. Now, business income, tax audit. Now, today, you have a tax audit limit of 1 crore. That 1 crore becomes 10 crores. If the total of amounts received in cash does not exceed 5%. Correct? Same way, total of payments also in cash also should not exceed. Now, when you were computing this 5% and the amounts received in cash, you considered everything. Whether business income or not business income. अगर किसी ने मेरे को gift दिया cash में, तो that also was constituted as amount received in cash. If somebody gave me a loan in cash, forget the section which says that you cannot accept a loan in cash, forget that. I did accept it. I accepted less than 20,000, 100 times in a year, right? So it became 20 lakh of rupees. That 20 lakh also entered this calculation. Now they are saying, no, this is not fair. So what do you want now? Instead of 5%, they now wanted 95%. They allowed 5% in cash. Now they are saying we want 95% by specified banking transaction. Same thing. But the difference is, it has to be 95% of all receipts and payments from business. 95% from all receipts and payments of business. Now 2 questions arise. One, you are telling me that the comparison barometer I have changed from your total to business. But in the numerator, what do you want? Do you want only business receipts in cash or even non-business receipts in cash in the numerator, but the denominator should be business? This is what you do when you go to presumptive tax provisions. But here it was not clear. I mean, here earlier things were clear, at least I knew what they want. They should have technically borrowed those presumptive tax ka language and put it here. There would have been no doubt. But anyway, they have left it. If they continue this way, we'll have to go through that question. Now this is again a mistake in the law, which I hope they correct. If they don't correct, assessees benefit a lot. 43B is non-obstante. It says forget everything stated in the earlier part, etc. And it says any sums payable which are given in the following section shall be allowed as a deduction on payment basis. Therefore, if you pay it, you will get it. If you don't pay it, you will not get it. I am not going to go by your method of accounting. I am not going to listen to anything else. Very well. However, 43B applies to a sum payable which is otherwise allowable as a deduction. Sum payable which is otherwise allowable as a deduction. Now these words, otherwise allowable as deduction, they are forgotten to add in the new provision. Therefore what happens? If I pay any of the amounts mentioned in the section which is otherwise not allowable as a deduction, I can still claim it as a deduction. For example, what? For example, I pay advance to an MSME guy. Is that advance otherwise allowable? The answer would have been no. But now I will say that there was an phrase there, otherwise allowable as deduction, you have removed that. If I paid something which is specifically disallowable under, I mean, whatever, 40, etc., the contribution to unrecognized provident fund, etc., and that item constitutes one of the clauses of that 43B parallel provision, which is whatever, 37, etc., then I will be able to claim it. I further support my argument by the language of 37 itself. They are saying the provisions of 37 are irrespective of any provision to the contrary in the act. The act says capital expenditure nahi dene ka. I paid advance, I paid MSME guy for machinery. Can I claim it? The answer will be yes. I will say, you are saying all payments to MSME on payment basis. I have paid for machinery. Your section is not, I mean, irrespective of anything to the contrary. Ridiculous, but this is the fallout of the language. I'm sure it will get corrected once they read it again. Method of accounting and the tax year in which liability is incurred. So this is 43B.
So it is good or bad?
It is good for the SSC. It will not go through, don't worry. They will change it. I mean, so many people are going to speak. They have also ears. People are recording. So I asked Vijay, you have to be conscious.
What do you say?
I mean, that's what I told him on WhatsApp. If you're recording, I have to be conscious. I have to speak limited. So it is limited or very obvious points are out. Okay, the sums payable was defined. Now there is no definition. Therefore, another controversy. What is sums payable? When do you say it is payable? I mean, for payable to happen, there has to be a contract. Otherwise, when do I say it is payable? Earlier you had a definition. Now you have removed that definition. At least I could not find it. If there is something, then I must have missed it. Okay. Now here they say, if a deduction in respect of any sum payable has been allowed in tax year in which liability was incurred, it shall not be allowed again in a subsequent year. Therefore, what is he contemplating? Incurred pehle, payment बाद में. उल्टा करो अभी. पेमेंट पहले, इनकर्ड बाद में. एडवांस पे किया, डिडक्शन दिया, इनकर किया, फिर से डिडक्शन दूंगा. You have not said no. You have stopped me one way. Ulta way you have not stopped me. Right? Earlier it was not possible. Why? Because earlier it said otherwise allowable. So when I paid it without incurring it, it was not otherwise allowable. But now, because you removed that, this is the consequence. See, they also needed thinking time, which was quite less with them. This non-resident ka presumptive tax aaya hai. Okay, now come to our presumptive tax. Yeah. Now today we have presumptive tax section in 3 provisions. No, 44 क्या है? AD business का है. ADA किसका है? और एक वो transport वाला भी है कहीं पे. हाँ. So all those 3 they have now combined. और they have given one table. First row is for business wala, second row is for transporter, and third row is profession wala. Your limits are the same. Your limits are the same. Your deemed profit or presumptive profit is the same. There is one difference. That difference is that today, what the rates are 8% and 6%, hai na? Yes. That 6% is for those people, I mean, that part of the turnover which is in specified banking transaction, etc. Right? Yeah. Digital transaction, whatever it is. वो लंबा लंबा define किया उसने. Now, वो turnover होगा तो उसका 6, बाकी का 8. During the year turnover होगा. पैसा बाद में आया, I don't know वो पैसा कैसे देगा. I sold goods on credit in the month of March on a 2-month credit. After 2 months only, I will come to know whether he is paying by account pay check or he is paying cash. If he pays cash, I am supposed to offer tax at 8%. If he pays me by whatever, specified digital, etc., जो भी है, तो I am supposed to pay 6%. Now, today's law provides that you can consider subsequent event from the end of the previous year up to due date of filing of return. If you have received payments in a digital form, you can, that part of turnover you can qualify as 6%, right? I do not know what happens if I have not received something till due date, right? Possible, मैंने मार्च में माल बेचा है, मेरा रिटर्न फाइलिंग का टाइम जुलाई या जो भी है, वहाँ तक पैसा आया ही नहीं है मेरे पास. नेक्स्ट ईयर में देने का कोई ऑप्शन नहीं है. इसी ईयर में मुझे डिसाइड करना है 8 और 6. आई डोंट नो व्हाट टू डिसाइड फॉर दैट पार्ट. बट at least where I have received money up to due date of filing, law was clear. Now that provision is missing. Therefore, I do not know what do you do. I would believe that that position should continue whether stated or not. Because ultimately, look at it, return भरा उसके पहले, that is the turnover for which I have received money in a digital form. Therefore, and what is the logic of this 8 and 6? Any idea? When they changed from 8 to 6, I think this was in demonetization time. The credit card companies charge 2%. If you swipe the credit card, the merchant was required to pay 2% to the credit card company. Therefore, his profit went down by 2%. That is why merchants were not taking. Even in Bombay, even today I know certain shops where if you go and you pay credit card, that guy tells you I will take 2% extra. Why? Because मेरे को पैसा लगता है, why should I suffer? I mean, that is that merchant's argument. Otherwise, you give me cash. I'm not concerned. I'm not going to allow you to swipe a credit card in my shop. I mean, there are shops we know. Now,
Jewelry shops mainly do that.
कौन? I don't know. I know Alpha over here in Pala. I mean, I have never tried to pay by credit card to a jeweler. Okay. Jewelry shop also is logical because I mean 10 लाख का ज्वेलरी देगा तो उसका 20,000 रुपया चला जाता है. Margin is this. So that was the logic of this 2%. 2% was the general rate these credit card companies were charging. So government said, okay, we will take that hit. 8 का 6 कर देंगे हम लोग. Now that you have not specified. So what should I do is one question. Second, today in year 1 of my business, it is very debatable as to whether I have an option not to enter the presumptive tax. Because if you read 4481, it begins with shall. Therefore, it's a mandate. You have to come in presumptive tax. Having entered, then you can get out. There is a provision down below in 4484 or 5. Having entered, if you get out, then 5 years I will not allow you to get in and all that. But first year, there is no choice. But the way amended law now is in ITB, you have a choice. Even in year 1, you can say, I don't want to go by presumptive tax. All that they are telling you is that, fine, in that case, what are they saying? Maintain your books of accounts, get your accounts audited, and furnish the audit report. I mean, so that provision is there. फाइन. वो प्रोफेशन बिजनेस वाले को एलिजिबल एसएससी बोलता है, प्रोफेशन वाले को स्पेसिफाइड एसएससी बोलता है, और दूसरे को ट्रांसपोर्टर. ओके, इन द ट्रांसपोर्टर दे हैव मेड अ मिस्टेक. अगेन और एन एंड किया है. नाउ द वर्ड और ईयर बिटवीन 1 and 2 correctly should have been and. Depending on the weight of the vehicle, you have your presumptive rates, 1,000 rupees, 7,500 rupees. Possible that I am a transporter who has got 3 vehicles of one type, 7 vehicles of another type. So what will be my presumptive profit? 1,000 into 3 plus 7,500 into 7. Therefore, it is 1,000 into 3 and 7,500 into 7. Well, what he is telling me is 1,000 into 3 or 7,500, which is absolutely wrong. I mean, but again, a typo should get corrected somewhere or the other. Okay. Now, this is again a great mistake. We have this 40A1A, which says what? Amount on which tax is deducted or is deductible but not deducted I will not give you a deduction to the extent of 30%. But in a subsequent year, if you deduct and pay, I'll give you a deduction. Or if you have deducted in year 1, you go and pay in year 2, I will give you a deduction. That's what proviso says, no? Right? 30% is in the first part, IA. Look at the proviso. Provided that where in respect of any such sum means आगे जो sum आया, tax has been deducted in any subsequent year or has been deducted during the year but paid after due date of 139(1), then the amount will be allowed in the year in which you have paid the TDS. देखो concept क्या है? Year 1 में tax काटा, year 2 में tax भरा after due date, तो year 2 में deduction दूंगा. Year 1 में tax काटा ही नहीं था, year 2 में आके tax काटा, year 2 में tax भरा, year 2 में deduction दूंगा. year 2 में tax काटा, year 3 में जाके tax भरा, तो year 3 में तेरे को deduction दूंगा. देखो concept is what? कि tax जब तुम government को दोगे तब deduction देने को आना. That's the simple funda of the section. Now what are they done? Tax is deducted and paid during any subsequent year. Therefore what he wants? Deduction भी next year में, payment भी next year में, right? Only that is covered by A. What happens to deduction in year 1, payment in year 2? Gone. Deduction in year 2, payment in year 2, deduction in year 2, payment in year 2, covered. Deduction in year 2, payment in year 3, gone. Now what is all this? I mean, ridiculous, but somebody has to point out. Of course, unintentional. There cannot be any purpose of doing all these changes. Okay. A mark-to-market loss I am leaving. The 6th proviso is also demerger, I mean amalgamation and all that. So let's forget it. We are running out of time. Actual cost man, let me tell you 1 point out of 3 points. If you have a GST on capital expenditure, for which you claim ITC, he's saying actual cost mein main minus karunga for the purpose of granting you depreciation, which is very fair. I mean, you're not bearing it, right? The rest I'm leaving all the other things. Let's forget.
Back to the TDS part, is it that the implication is that you should deduct and pay in time within due dates, else you'll lose the benefit of that 30% deduction also? Means the 30%
वो पहले 100 था, 100 का 30 किया उसने. एक जमाने में 100 था, 100 का उसने 30 किया है. उसका वो पर्पस नहीं है, because TDS provision में if the other person has paid it off, in fact I'm not even an assessee in default. I mean, this is purely a mistake. This is purely a mistake. I mean, there's no logic and reason for it. Cannot happen. The way you are saying, what you are saying is, I want to ensure strict compliance. Then you should not have gone to that proviso also, deducted and paid in second year. वो दे रहा है ना. तो नहीं, but if I deduct in year 1 and pay in year 2, you don't want to give me. So you are encouraging काटो भी मत. उल्टा ना. आप नहीं, आप जो बोल रहे हो उससे उल्टा हो रहा है.
Because of the language used over there, they are probably trying to interpret that once you deduct, you better pay, otherwise you don't deduct benefit at all. Section 43B.
So therefore, what I'm better off. In fact,
by not doing it,
there is no prosecution also if I don't deduct.
Correct.
If I deduct and don't pay, there is prosecution.
That's right.
If I don't deduct, there is no prosecution also. I mean, I should not be teaching this, but Vijay, you should not keep recording of all these things. Okay, now this 45(2), capital gain. Transfer का definition says when you convert a capital asset into stock in trade, it is a transfer. 45(2) says transfer तो हो गया, लेकिन tax तब लूंगा when you sell or otherwise transfer such stock in trade. Okay, so 45(2) overrides 45(1). Because 45(1) says capital gains chargeable in the year of transfer. 247 says your conversion of capital asset into stock in trade is a transfer. Therefore, going by 45(1), I must pay tax. But 45(2) says, no, when you convert capital asset into stock in trade, fair market value on the date of conversion will be deemed to be full value of consideration, but tax will be payable in the year in which such stock in trade is sold or otherwise transferred. Now they are saying sold or otherwise transferred, adding the words by any other means. I don't know any other means कैसे expand करेगा उसको. What I could not just imagine कि what was earlier not covered and now is going to be covered. See, I have a capital asset. I convert it into stock in trade. Then I gift it away. What happens? It is transferred. Gift is also a transfer, right? Therefore, capital gain tax liability should trigger. I have a capital asset. I convert into stock in trade. Now I convert that full company into an LLP, right? The question will be, have I transferred stock in trade? I may argue, no, I have transferred an undertaking. By transferring the undertaking, the stock in trade also went. I have not transferred it. There's no action on my part. I don't know whether that is the type of case which they are trying to cover or not. But honestly, I have no answer as to how they are expanding by adding the words by any other means. So I'll leave it there. Okay, now market-linked debentures. This came when 50 AA, 1423 ko aaya. When this came, they said, now what does 50 AA say? 50 AA says that whatever capital gain arises on transfer of market-linked debentures, irrespective of the holding period, we are going to regard it as short-term capital gain. As simple as that. Now, when this law came on 1423, people had already subscribed to market-linked debentures. Therefore, they said that whatever you have acquired up to 1423, we are grandfathering. We are not going to touch them. Therefore, whatever you acquire from today onwards, this is what is going to be the law which will apply. Today, when they are shifting over from 50 AA to clause 76 of the bill, they have forgotten this grandfathering provision. Therefore, what will happen is, all those people who acquired market-linked debentures prior to 1423 should sell it off before 31/3/26. Because otherwise, something which otherwise could have qualified as long-term capital gain now will get captured under the income tax bill. If it goes through as it is, then it will become a short-term. Therefore, what if at all you have some market-linked debentures acquired prior to 1423 which you are holding, before the bill becomes an act, you must actually, before the bill comes into force, you must sell it off, pay tax as long-term, and then continue forward. Okay, now that is 50 AA. Now this is a classic, beautiful English language change. 50D. Now what they are saying? What does 50D do? We had this old decision of Supreme Court which said, I think George Anderson or something, which said consideration is value of what I receive. Okay, so if I change my pen for your iPhone, to compute capital gain of pen, I don't have to consider the value of pen, I have to consider the value of the phone. Minus the cost of the pen, that will be the capital gain in my hands. And for you, it is going to be value of the pen minus the cost of the phone, that will be your capital gain. Right? So, what is full value of consideration? Consideration is value of what comes in. Now, if I did not know value of what is coming in, I said your computation mechanism fails, therefore I am not going to pay any tax. Example, revenue sharing development agreement. We agree that you will sell the flats, whatever revenue comes, you will give me some percentage thereof. What transfer is happening today, I do not know consideration, therefore I said I am not going to pay any tax. Then subsequently when revenue was realized, I said, boss, you are supposed to tax me in the year of transfer. Year of transfer to gaya piche. Therefore this year you cannot pay, ask me to pay tax. So to overcome all this maramari, they came with 50D. What did they say in 50D? That look here boss, if value of what you are receiving cannot be ascertained, then the value of what you are giving will be regarded as full value of consideration. That is 50D. It's been there since what, 13, 14 or whatever that. It's been there for quite some time now. Now the main word was cannot be determined. Now cannot को अभी change कर रहा है unable to be. Now unable is something, cannot is something. Cannot means what? कोई नहीं कर सकता. It cannot happen, right? Whereas unable means I am unable. He may be able to do it, right? Now who's unable? Me or the AO? That also you are not saying. But you are saying unable to be determined. Unable is subjective. I may be unable, you may be able, right? Now at least you could have said that. Again, I don't think there was any need. There was not even a reduction of words happening. Cannot को तुमने unable से substitute किया है. What are you getting? God knows. Right? Now, Supreme Court, unable has been explained not having sufficient strength, power and means. So I may not be having sufficient strength, power and means. Therefore I am unable, but you are not. You have that sufficient strength, power and means. Therefore unable is subjective. Cannot be has been explained but not very relevant. Right? Okay. Now today we know that while computing long-term capital gains there is no indexation to be provided, and therefore they have reduced the tax rate from 20 to 12.5. Now therefore there is no question of giving indexation to anybody. But under 72(2) they have taken a power. They are saying we are going to notify the transactions, and for the transactions which we prescribe, for those transactions you will get index cost of acquisition and cost of improvement. I do not know why they have taken this power and what are they going to notify, but this is what they have taken. Okay. 50C, I told you this accessible thing. Okay, now come to 54F. Now 54F, gains arising from transfer of a long-term capital asset other than a residential house invested in a residential house. There is some proviso to that 54F1 which says that you will not get the benefit of 54F if 1, 2, 3, 4. One of them is if you purchase a new house within a period of 1 year from the date of transfer of original asset other than the new house. New house तो खरीदने का है 54F लेने के लिए, लेकिन वो new house के अलावा अगर आपने कोई और घर खरीदा within a period of 1 year from the date of transfer of original asset, then 54F will be withdrawn. Now that 1 year they are making it to 2 years. I mean nothing wrong because 54F2 anyway said 2 years. Right? Now 54, 54EC and 54F, they have changed the opening language. Now all three today begin with the expression capital gain arises from transfer of a long-term capital asset. Capital gain arises from transfer of a long-term capital asset. That language they are changing now. In 54 they are saying has long-term capital gain arising from transfer of a capital asset. Has long-term capital gain arising from transfer of a capital asset. In 54 EC he is saying has long-term capital gains. And in 54F he is saying has capital gain arising from transfer of any long-term capital asset. Now why all this jugglery? They want to plug the loophole created because of Supreme Court decision in VS Tempo and what is Builders and other business. Now, what is the concept? Section 50 says then when you transfer a depreciable asset and there is a gain, that gain can arise in two situations. One, the block continues to exist, but the consideration is more than opening WDV plus additions. Right? I sell one house out of 3 houses, or I sell one factory building out of 3 factory buildings, but the selling price of that one factory building is so great that it offsets the opening WDV of the block plus additions to the block, if any. The block becomes negative in simple language. That gain 50 says will be short-term capital gain. Second situation, the block ceases to exist. एक ही फैक्ट्री बिल्डिंग था, बेच दिया, अब ब्लॉक ही नहीं रहा, गेन रह गया, लॉस रह गया, जो भी रह गया, that is going to be short term capital gain. So in both the situations the deeming was short-term capital gain. In the first case, the language uses excess is deemed to be short-term capital gain. In second case, the gain itself is a short-term capital gain. Now question arose that whether such gain can be claimed as exempt by investing in bonds under 54E. Supreme Court said yes, why not? Supreme Court said look at section 50. What is it doing? It is non-obstante 242A, let it be. And it is proposing modifications which are there only for 48 and 49. These modifications do not apply to other provisions of the law. Therefore, though the gain is deemed to be short term, the asset which you have transferred continues to remain long term. Therefore, when I read 54 EC in those days, 54E tha shayad, in VS Tempo I think it was 54E. Now, when the court read 54E, it said gain arises from transfer of as capital asset, long-term capital asset or something. Supreme Court said asset is undoubtedly long-term capital asset, therefore he will get 54E. Concept is तुमने gain को deem किया है, asset को deem नहीं किया है. तुमने फिक्शन क्रिएट किया लेकिन वो फिक्शन खाली 48 और 49 के लिए बाकी चीजों के लिए नहीं है. Now that is what was hurting the department. Okay, what is all this happening? So they have made changes where section 50 का corresponding में भी change है 54, 54 EC, 54F. But I still believe that everything is not lost. They have still missed the bus. If they wanted, they should have put in a section that where section 50 gain arises, you are not entitled against that gain to claim any deduction under 54, 54 EC, 54F. Nothing stops you from doing that. But you do not do that. You go in a roundabout manner. And what do? In 82 you say has long-term capital gain. Again 85 you say long-term capital gain and has capital gain arising from transfer of any long-term capital asset. So 54F में तो कोई doubt ही नहीं रहता अभी भी. The only thing is, have they plugged 54 and 54 EC? To my mind, no. Again 54 is irrelevant because एक बार depreciation दिया, so it is not an asset whose annual value is chargeable under house property. So 54 any which ways आपको मिलने वाला नहीं था. The only option was 54 EC and 54 F, those depreciable assets. Okay, now long-term capital gain itself is a defined expression. 268 says long-term capital gain means capital gain arising from transfer of a long-term capital asset. Now go and substitute this language in the previous section. Wherever he has used the word long-term capital gain, uski jagah ye meaning substitute karo. What will you get? Has gains arising from transfer of a long-term capital asset. That is how you read. Now once you substitute that, is your asset a long-term capital asset? The answer is yes. So what have you achieved? You achieved nothing. Argument in their favor. Possibly, they might have thought that section 2, which is interpretation section now, begins with the heading unless the context otherwise requires. So we will argue that this definition of long-term capital gain is not required in the context. I mean, that could be possibly the argument they may be having. I mean, all these are guesses. We really don't know what has happened. Okay, section 50 में उसने क्या किया है? 40 में, sorry, 74 is corresponding to 50. There, where block continues, but the value becomes negative, he is deeming the excess to be capital gain arising from transfer of a short-term capital asset. Therefore, he is deeming कि जो gain है, it is a capital gain which has arisen from transfer of a short-term capital asset. In situation B, he is saying that income accrued or received is deemed to be short-term capital gain, which is exactly the same as your earlier language. Therefore, you achieve nothing as far as second part is concerned. Question is whether you achieve anything in the first part. To my mind, again, debatable. Okay. Okay, today, long-term capital loss can be set off only against long-term capital gain. Correct?
No, short term also.
Long term against long term. Because long term, if you go and set off against short term, you'll get a tax double advantage. So long term loss only against long term gain, short term loss against both. Logic is very simple. लॉन्ग टर्म कंसेशनल रेट पे होता है, शॉर्ट टर्म का रेट ज्यादा है, तो कम रेट वाला लॉस ज्यादा रेट वाले इनकम के सामने नहीं सेट ऑफ करने दूंगा तेरे को, वह उल्टा करने दूंगा मैं तुमको. ओके, दैट्स द फंडामेंटल प्रिंसिपल. नाउ व्हेन यू आर मूविंग फ्रॉम द ओल्ड लॉ टू द न्यू लॉ, possible that you have some brought forward capital losses. They are saying that we will allow anything against anything. So whatever is your brought forward long-term capital loss as on 31/3/26 can be set off against short-term capital gain arising in tax year 26-27 and thereafter. Okay. So that's a concession. Probably they want to finish the old baggage कि जो पुराना है वो खत्म करो. I mean, we don't want unnecessary. Maybe, I mean, I don't know. But this is the saving clause. 5536 to N. Quite clear, very clear language. Okay, fine. Okay, other sources. Now here see. Now descendant में he is writing maternal and paternal, but ascendant में he is not writing. आगे हमने देखा ascendant में था, descendant में नहीं था. यहाँ पे is writing in one, in the second when it's coming to my spouse, he is writing in both. Therefore, out of 4, in 3 places he is writing, 1 place he is not writing. I do not know whether it's an omission or whatever it is. Okay, property will now include virtual digital asset also. Forget clubbing. Now this is major change. 68 to 69D. If you get caught there, you end up paying tax under 115 BBE. Now each of these sections, 68 to 69D, uses the word may. So AO may tax it, AO may not tax it. Now that may is replaced by shall. Therefore, no option. Does it mean that in all cases it is taxable? I would not agree. Before that, when this 1961 law came, that time also each of these sections at the bill stage had the word shall. It was referred to a select committee. Select committee changed the word shall to may. Right? Matter traveled to the Supreme Court in some case, and Supreme Court noticed that bill stage पे shall था, act stage पे may हुआ, at the insistence of the select committee. Therefore AO has a discretion. If he has not taxed it, it's okay. Right? That was the decision of Supreme Court, interpreting the word may and saying that for each of these sections AO has a discretion. Okay, today again you are going back to 1960 and again you are replacing may with shall. A draconian step. I mean, one will only increase litigation because your AO in all cases is going to add. He will say shall लिखा है साहब मैं क्या करूँ ऊपर जाके ले लो जो देता है आपको. As far as I am concerned, I am going to add it. But why should I take a chance? The section says shall. If the section was may also, they were not taking a chance. Now with shall, undoubtedly they are not going to take a chance. Second change. The heading of this cash credit section has been changed from cash credit to sorry. Yeah.
Second line.
Yeah, the heading has been changed from cash credit to unexplained credit. Therefore, that controversy as to journal entry covered or not now will revive. But earlier we said journal entry can never be covered. Well, you're talking of cash credit. Today they are saying unexplained credit. Credit to hai, explain nahi kiya. Okay, one of the trigger points of cash credit section is that either you don't offer an explanation or you offer an explanation which in the opinion of the AO is not satisfactory. Now if you put the word shall what is, I mean, what use is this second part? Can I offer an explanation which in your opinion is satisfactory? Then also will you read shall? So possible, I mean, you have n number of decisions of the Supreme Court that may has to be read as shall if context requires, and shall also can be read as may if the context requires. So we'll have to go on those decisions now and argue that maybe law has used the word shall, but in the circumstances this shall has to be read as may, because otherwise that power given to the AO of his own satisfaction becomes, I mean, redundant sort of. Okay. In 69D, it was borrowing or repayment on a hundi. Now that hundi was defined to mean something written in a vernacular language. Today we don't find instruments written in vernacular language, so whenever department caught anything and tried to invoke 69D, we said, sir, 69 hundi is explained to mean a document in a vernacular language. The document which you are holding in your hand is in English and therefore is not a hundi, and therefore 69D does not apply. So to change that, now they have said hundi or a negotiable instrument. So one change. Borrowing on hundi covered, repayment on a hundi covered, I mean repayment through a negotiable instrument covered, also interest covered. Because today interest on that borrowing was not covered, that also now they have covered. Now these all they say are not, I mean, policy changes. If they are not policy changes, what are they? You keep shouting that we have not done any changes, we have not done any policy changes. Then what is all this that we are looking at? And this is a primary first reading. Okay, now coming to chapter 6A. 80 TTA and TTB are merged into one section. That's a small thing, nothing great over there. The main thing is ATM. Now we have two types of companies. Manufacturing companies which pay tax at 15%, and we have the other companies which pay tax at, I think, 22% or what, 22% something. Those who have opted for that new tax regime. Now, those who pay tax at 15% can get ATM. But those who are paying tax at 22%, to such companies ATM does not apply. Now again, I cannot think of a reason why it should be so. The only thing is, department normally is averse to this holding subsidiary and things like that. So they don't like the concepts where, like, you have a company held by another company and company held by another company. Now, this to my mind has to go. Is this a mistake? Maybe not. Why do I say maybe not? Because for these 22% companies, they are giving 80JJAA. Therefore, you are conscious कि ये deduction देना है. तो जो हटाया है तुमने सोच समझ के हटाया है कि 15% वाले को तो ATM दिया है, 22 वाले को ATM नहीं है, which is a major change. Okay, new tax regime we saw. The last point I'll take on TDS. Now all TDS provisions are in a table form. One or two main things. Today, 197 certificate applies only for certain sections. Therefore, there are certain sections for which you cannot get a nil or a low tax deduction certificate under 197. Now the provision under the bill is that you will get a 197 certificate qua all sections. But the downside is, today you get nil rate, now you will never get nil rate. It can be a small rate, but it will be a rate. Therefore, nil you will not get, 0.1 you will get. Practically today is not, but that is practical, that's not the law. The law gives you nil rate. Practically they may not be given, is a different reason. I mean, you can still go to a writ court possibly if your stakes are so high. So this is one change. Second change, under 195, subsection 3, a non-resident can apply for a certificate and get a certificate, or a resident payer can apply and get a certificate under 195 too. Now they are saying, no, we will not entertain an application from a non-resident. Therefore, 195(3) is out. It is only a resident who needs to apply. Resident payer will have to apply and obtain a certificate. Now, this business of small rate is going to become dangerous for an ordinary individual. Supposing you have borrowed a housing loan from Standard Chartered Bank and you are paying interest on that housing loan to Standard Chartered Bank. Under 195, you are required to deduct TDS. Today, Standard Chartered had that nil rate certificate. Going forward, they will never get nil rate certificate, they will get a 0.1% or 0.0% or whatever they get. But on that rate you will have to apply, you will have to deduct TDS from the interest. So from every EMI, you have to find out how much is the principal and how much is the interest. On the interest, you are required to pay TDS. Therefore, you will have to apply for TAN. You will have to pay TDS, you will have to file a quarterly statement, you will have to generate a certificate, give the certificate to Standard Chartered Bank. Therefore, what will happen? Standard Chartered, I will not take a housing loan. I may not take a housing loan from Standard Chartered, but if I am having a credit card of Standard Chartered and I default on the payment of the credit card, Standard Chartered is going to charge me, they call it interest, what do they call it? I don't use credit cards, so. Sorry? Late payment charge, which will be akin to your interest or whatever it is still income in the hands of Standard Chartered. Therefore, on that amount, you will be required to deduct TDS. Therefore, one slip in your credit card statement will trigger taking off TAN, deducting TDS, paying TDS, filing a quarterly statement, generating a certificate. So all these are unintended. I do not know whether they really intend all these consequences or not, but these are unintended consequences. Shipping companies, all your custom house agents, they make payments to shipping companies. They don't deduct TDS. Why? Because they have that nil certificate. Every shipping line has it. But now they will never get that certificate. They will get 0.1. So every payment will have to be tracked. Okay. I think I'll stop. The last point and I stop. Good. Side is also. My time allotted is cost. Okay, now today a statement on oath is recorded in a search. When they come and do a survey, they cannot record a statement on oath. Going forward, even in a survey, he has the power to record statement on oath. I think I'll stop over here. I have far exceeded my time. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Or irrespective of whatever mistake draftsman had done while drafting this law, but we have gained a lot today. This will help us in future litigation.
Irrespective of
Whatever mistakes they have done in drafting the law. And I would differ on one thing you said. You said, if you have been given a chance to draft the law or any chapter, it is difficult for you. But we are differing on this. Now I would like to call our past president Vijay Kevalamani to propose a vote of thanks to our speaker.
अरे थोड़ा आवाज काटो भाई हाँ जगदीश जगह भी लगे ना भाई बुद्धि का सुमया है हमारा
सोया है सब.
It's a very difficult task to propose a vote of thanks to such an enlightened speaker. The way he has interpreted and shown us the comparisons with the interpretations and all that. It's always difficult, but yes, I do admire Jagdish. Hats off to him, the way he goes into it, the way he interprets. I'm sure all of you would agree with me, the way he has given the detailed interpretation on behalf of tax friends. When I called him, he readily agreed. It was only an issue of dates that we were not getting, and then there was an issue with venue, which was again sorted out by Deepak Bhai. Thank you, Deepak Bhai, for arranging this venue at a short notice. And even at a short notice, all of you have come. I would like to personally, on behalf of tax friends and the team, thank you all for taking out time and coming on a busy Sunday, in spite of just getting free yesterday from the advance tax. So thank you very much. And if you are not informed us about your picnic details, please write to us now. After this, we will be having a contributory lunch. All those who wish to join can join us on the second floor restaurant. Thank you, Jagdish Panjabi.